The needle pierces Samuel's arm, and his blood begins flowing into the IV bag destined for the dying billionaire in the operating room, the same man who signed away his existence 23 years ago without a second thought. If you're here for jaw-dropping stories about fate, redemption, and unbelievable plot twists, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss these wild tales. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. New York, LA, Lagos, London? Let's go. Nobody in that Lagos hospital knew what was happening. The doctors were too busy trying to save a life. The nurses were running between rooms with bags of blood and emergency medications. Samuel was sitting in a plastic chair in the donation room, watching his blood fill the bag, thinking about the $50 they promised him and how far it would stretch. Maybe 2 weeks of meals if he was careful. Maybe a new pair of shoes if he skipped a few dinners. And Victor Okonkwo was lying on that operating table, unconscious, bleeding internally from a car crash that happened so fast his driver didn't even see the truck coming. The collision sent the Mercedes spinning 3 times before slamming into a concrete barrier. Metal twisted like taper, glass everywhere, and Victor's body took the worst of it. The paramedics gave him 20 minutes, maybe 30 if he was lucky. The doctors at Lagos General gave him less. They needed O-negative blood immediately, but the blood bank was empty, completely dry. The next delivery wasn't coming for 4 hours, and Victor didn't have 4 hours. He had minutes. That's when Samuel walked past the emergency room visiting a friend who'd caught pneumonia sleeping under a bridge during the rainy season. He heard the commotion, saw the panic on the nurses' faces, heard someone shout about O-negative blood. And Samuel, who owned nothing but the clothes on his back and a dream that kept getting pushed further away, walked up to the desk and said 5 words that changed everything. "I'm O-negative. I'll donate." The nurse looked at him like he was crazy, looked at his torn shirt, his worn-out sneakers with holes in the sides, the dirt under his fingernails from sorting through recycling bins earlier that morning. But blood is blood, and they were desperate. 20 minutes later, Samuel's blood was pumping through Victor Okonkwo's veins, keeping his heart beating, keeping his brain alive, keeping the father he never knew from dying before they could ever meet. But here's what makes this story different from every other coincidence you've heard about. Samuel had been searching for his father his entire life. Every birthday, every Christmas, every lonely night in foster care, he wondered about the man whose name was left blank on his birth certificate. He had one clue, just one. His mother's first name, Adana. That's it. No last name, no address, no photographs, nothing. The adoption agency sealed the records. Every private investigator he scraped together money to hire hit the same dead end. It was like his parents had been erased from existence. And Victor? Victor had spent 23 years trying to forget, trying to bury the memory of that night when he was 25 years old, ambitious, hungry for success, and his girlfriend Adana told him she was pregnant. He was closing the biggest business deal of his young career, oil contracts worth millions, real estate developments that would make him richer than his father ever dreamed. And a baby? A baby would ruin everything. So he made a choice. He told Adana he wasn't ready, told her they were too young, told her his family would never accept it, told her every lie he could think of until she finally understood he wasn't going to be there. He gave her money, enough to take care of things, and then he disappeared into his empire building. He married someone else 5 years later, had 3 kids with her, kids he raised, kids he loved, kids whose names were on his will. And that first child, that baby boy born to Adana 23 years ago, he pushed him so far back in his mind that sometimes he could go months without remembering. But on certain nights, when the house was quiet and his wife was asleep and the guilt came creeping in like smoke under a door, Victor would wonder. He'd wonder if the boy was okay, if Adana kept him or gave him up, if he was alive or dead, if he ever thought about the father who abandoned him. And then Victor would pour himself another drink and push those thoughts away again, because what was done, and you can't unbreak what you've already destroyed. Now, fast forward to that Tuesday morning. Victor's in the back of his Mercedes S-Class on a conference call about a $50 million deal when the truck runs the red lights. He doesn't even see it coming. 1 second, he's talking about profit margins. The next second, there's an explosion of metal and glass and pain, and then nothing. Just darkness. His wife Chioma gets the call 20 minutes later. She's at their home in Ikoyi, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Lagos, planning a charity gala, when her phone rings and a doctor she's never met tells her that her husband was in an accident and she needs to come to the hospital immediately. She doesn't ask questions, doesn't waste time. She grabs her purse and runs out the door, leaving everything behind. By the time she arrives, Victor's out of surgery. Stable, but barely. The doctor meets her in the hallway outside the ICU, and that's when she learns about the blood donation. About the young man who walked in off the street and saved her husband's life without asking for anything in return. We need to find him, Chioma says immediately. We need to thank him properly. But Samuel's already gone. He donated the blood, declined the payments because his body markers needed it more, and walked out of that hospital thinking he'd just done a good deed for a stranger. He had no idea that stranger was his father. No idea that the blood now keeping Victor alive carried the same DNA, the same genetic code, the same biological markers that proved they were connected in the most fundamental way possible. And Victor, when he wakes up 3 days later in a private hospital suite that costs more per night than most people make in a month, he asks about the donor, asks who saved him. His wife tells him everything the hospital staff could remember. A young man, early 20s, clearly struggling, didn't want the money, just wanted to help. Victor's first instinct is business. Find him, compensate him, turn this into a good PR story maybe. But something else is nagging at him. Something he can't quite name. A strange feeling that won't go away. He hires a private investigator. In Lagos, if you have money, you can find anyone. The PI delivers results in 6 days. Name, Samuel Adeyemi. Age, 23. Background, foster care system. Aged out at 18. Currently homeless. Does odd jobs around Victoria Island and Ikoyi. The investigator includes a photograph. Victor stares at it for 10 minutes straight. There's something about the eyes. Something about the shape of the face, something familiar that he can't quite place, but that makes his chest feel tight. He tells himself he's being ridiculous. The kid's 23, same age as the son he abandoned, but Nigeria has millions of 23-year-olds. This is just a coincidence, just guilt playing tricks on his mind. But Victor can't shake it. That night, alone in his study with a glass of whiskey he's not supposed to be drinking because the doctors told him no alcohol for 6 weeks, the memories come flooding back. He sees Adana's face the night she told him she was pregnant, sees the hope in her eyes that died when he told her he couldn't do it, sees her leaving his apartment with her hand on her stomach, protecting the child he was rejecting. He remembers the last thing she said to him. One day, Victor, you regret this. One day you'll want to know your son and he won't want to know you. He hasn't thought about those words in years. Now they're echoing in his head like a curse. Victor sets up a meeting with Samuel at a cafe in Ikoyi. Tells his assistant to arrange it as a thank you gesture, nothing more. But when Samuel walks in the door 2 days later, nervous and out of place in his cleanest shirt and borrowed shoes, Victor feels something shift in his chest. The kid sits down, shakes his hand, and says it was nothing, sir. Anyone would have done the same. But Victor knows that's not true. Most people wouldn't have. Most people would have kept walking. Most people don't have the kind of heart that gives away blood they could have sold when they're sleeping in shelters and eating 1 meal a day. They talk for an hour. Victor asks questions, and Samuel answers honestly, brutally honestly, about growing up in foster care, about the families that took him in and sent him back, about aging out of the system with nothing,
about the jobs that don't pay enough, and the dreams that keep getting smaller. But there's no bitterness in his voice, no anger, just a quiet resilience that reminds Victor of someone, but he can't remember who. Then Samuel mentions his birth mother.
"I've been looking for her my whole life," he says, stirring sugar into coffee he didn't want but accepted to be polite. "All I know is her first name was Adana. She was a student when she had me. That's it. That's all I've got." The coffee cup slips from Victor's hand. It doesn't fall. He catches it, but coffee splashes onto the table, and Samuel jumps back and apologizes like it's his fault. Victor's mind is screaming. Adana, his Adana, the student he got pregnant 23 years ago, the woman whose name he hasn't spoken aloud in decades, the mother of the child he abandoned. And this kid sitting across from him, this kid who saved his life, this kid who's been searching for his parents his entire existence. Victor's hands are shaking so badly, he has to put them under the table. He asks more questions, trying to sound casual, trying to keep his voice steady. Where was Samuel born? Lagos. When exactly? Samuel tells him the date, and Victor's heart stops because he knows that date. He remembers it. It was 3 weeks after Adana told him she couldn't go through with giving the baby up for adoption, that she was going to keep him and raise him alone. It was the last time Victor ever spoke to her. And then Samuel says something that breaks whatever composure Victor has left. "The adoption papers say I was left at a church, St. Mary's in Yaba. Someone just left me there in the middle of the night with a note that said my mother couldn't take care of me." Victor knows that church. He drove Adana there himself. He was the one who convinced her she couldn't raise a child alone without support, without money, without a father. He was the one who told her giving the baby up was the kindest thing she could do. And apparently, after he stopped returning her calls, after he cut her completely out of his life, she did exactly what he suggested. She left their son at that church and walked away. Victor excuses himself from the table, tells Samuel he needs to make a phone call, locks himself in the bathroom and stares at his reflection in the mirror and tries to breathe. This can't be real. This can't be happening. But it is. He knows it is. Every detail lines up. The timing, the name, the church, the age, everything points to one impossible, devastating truth. The homeless kid who saved his life is his son. The young man sitting in that cafe, drinking coffee and talking about his dreams of going to college someday, is the baby Victor threw away 23 years ago. And Samuel has no idea. No idea at all. Victor returns to the table and writes a check. 2 million naira. He pushes it across the table and tells Samuel it's not charity, it's gratitude. Samuel's eyes go wide. It's more money than he's ever seen in his life. Enough to get an apartment, buy clothes, maybe even enroll in night school. He tries to refuse, but Victor insists. Then Victor offers him something else. A job at Okonko Industries. Entry level, mailroom position, but with real opportunity to move up. Samuel can't believe what he's hearing. His life is changing in real time. Everything he's been struggling for, everything that seemed impossible an hour ago, is suddenly within reach. And Victor? Victor is screaming inside. Screaming at himself for what he did 23 years ago. Screaming at fate for bringing his son back in the cruelest way possible. Screaming at the universe for making him face this truth now, after all this time. But he doesn't tell Samuel. He can't. Not yet. He needs proof. He needs to be sure. That night, Victor does something he knows is wrong, but can't stop himself from doing. He goes back to the office after everyone's gone home
and takes Samuel's coffee cup from the break room trash. It still has DNA on the rim. He packages it carefully and sends it to a private lab along with his own DNA sample. The request is simple: paternity test, rush results. Money is no object. 3 days later, the email arrives. Victor is in his home office when his phone buzzes. He opens the attachment, scans past all the technical jargon, and finds the conclusion. Probability of paternity: 99.97%.
The phone slips from his hand and hits the floor. Victor sits there in his leather chair, in his mansion worth millions, surrounded by everything he built by putting ambition before humanity. And he realizes he's been living with a ghost for 23 years. A ghost he created. A ghost that just became real. His wife Chioma finds him an hour later, still sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. She knows something's catastrophically wrong. She's been married to this man for 18 years, raised 3 children with him, built a life together, and she's never seen him look like this, like he's been hollowed out from the inside. She doesn't ask questions at first, just sits next to him and waits. Finally, Victor tells her everything. The affair before they met, the pregnancy, the abandonment, the decades of guilt he's been carrying. And now this impossible twist where the son he threw away saved his life, and neither of them knew until it was too late to pretend it never happened. Chioma listens in silence. When he finishes, she's quiet for a long time. Then she says exactly what Victor's been afraid to hear. You have to tell him. Victor shakes his head. I can't. How do I tell him I'm the reason his life was hell? How do I look him in the eye and say I'm his father after abandoning him? You don't have a choice anymore, Chioma says. He's working for you. He's in your life now. The truth is going to come out eventually. And if he finds out some other way, if he discovers you knew and didn't tell him, that betrayal will be worse than the original one. But Victor's terrified. Terrified of losing the fragile connection they've started building. Terrified of seeing hate in Samuel's eyes. Terrified that his son will never forgive him. Meanwhile, Samuel's living the best weeks of his life. He's got a job, a steady paycheck, a small apartment he's renting with his first month's salary. He's showering every day, eating regular meals, sleeping in a real bed. He's meeting people at work who treat him like a human being instead of trash on the street. And Victor's been good to him, checking in, offering advice, introducing him to people who can help his career. Samuel started thinking of Victor as a mentor, maybe even a friend, someone who saw potential in him when nobody else did. But Samuel's still searching for his birth parents. He's saved enough money now to hire a real private investigator, not the cheap ones who took his money and delivered nothing. This one's good. This one has connections. And 2 weeks after Samuel gives him all the information he has, the investigator calls with news. He found Adana. She's alive. She's living in Port Hackett, remarried, has 3 other children, works as a school teacher, and she's willing to meet Samuel if he wants. Samuel wants. He takes a bus 5 hours to Port Hackett on a Saturday morning. He's carrying the folder with all his adoption documents, the few photographs he has from foster care, and the letter he wrote the night before, but isn't sure he'll have the courage to give her. When he arrives at the address, his hands are shaking. He knocks on the door. A woman in her late 40s opens it. She has kind eyes and graying hair, and when she sees Samuel standing there, her face goes pale. She knows. Somehow, she knows. Samuel? He can't speak. He just nods. And then Adana does something he didn't expect. She starts crying. Not quiet tears, deep, broken sobs that come from somewhere old and wounded. She pulls him inside, and they sit in her living room, and for the first time in 23 years, Samuel hears his mother's voice. She tells him everything, about falling in love with him when they were students, about getting pregnant and being terrified, about how Victor promised he'd support her, then changed his mind, then disappeared completely,
about how she tried to raise Samuel alone for 3 weeks before realizing she couldn't do it, about leaving him at that church in the middle of the night, kissing his forehead, and walking away because she thought she was giving him a chance at a better life.
I thought you'd be adopted by a good family, she says, tears streaming down her face. I thought you'd have everything I couldn't give you. I never knew you ended up in foster care. I never knew you suffered. Samuel asks the question he's been holding his entire life. What about my father? Where is he? Adana hesitates. She hasn't spoken Victor's name in decades. She tried to forget him, tried to move on, built a new life with a good man who loved her and her past. But now her son is sitting in front of her, asking about the man who destroyed them both. His name is Victor Okonkwo, she says finally. He's a very powerful man now, rich, successful, everything he wanted to be. And when I told him I was pregnant, he made it very clear he didn't want you. Someone's world stops. The walls seem to tilt. His vision blurs. Victor Okonkwo, his boss, his mentor, the man whose life he saved, the one who's been helping him rebuild his life, the man who wrote him a check and gave him a job and treated him with more kindness than anyone has in years. That man is his father, the father who abandoned him, the father who chose money and success over his own child, the father who's been lying to him every single day since they met. Samuel stands up so fast the chair nearly falls over. Adana reaches for him, but he pulls away. He can barely breathe. His mind is racing through every conversation he's had with Victor, every moment, every interaction, trying to figure out if Victor knew, trying to figure out if this whole thing, the job, the money, the mentorship, was some kind of guilt-driven performance. He doesn't say goodbye to Adana. He just walks out of that house and catches the next bus back to Lagos. The 5-hour ride feels like 5 minutes. He's too angry to sit still, too betrayed to think straight. By the time he arrives in Lagos, it's late Sunday night, but Samuel doesn't care. He goes straight to Okonkwo Industries. The security guard tries to stop him, but Samuel pushes past, takes the elevator to the top floor. Victor is not there. It's almost midnight, but someone knows where Victor Okonkwo lives. Everyone knows where Victor Okonkwo lives. His mansion is famous. Samuel shows up at Victor's gate at 1 in the morning. The security guard calls the house, and Victor, who hasn't been sleeping well for weeks, tells them to let him in. When Samuel walks through that front door, Victor knows exactly why he's there. He can see it in Samuel's eyes, the betrayal, the rage, the hurt. Samuel doesn't waste time with pleasantries. He asks, "Did you know?" His voice is shaking. "When you met me at that cafe, did you already know I was your son?" Victor wants to lie, wants to say no, wants to make this easier on both of them, but he's done lying. "No," he says, "not at first, but I suspected. And then I took your DNA and had it tested. I've known for 2 weeks." The silence that follows is the loudest thing Victor has ever heard. "You've known for 2 weeks?" Samuel repeats slowly. "You've known that I am your son, the son you abandoned, the son whose life you destroyed, and you didn't tell me. You just kept pretending, kept playing mentor, kept acting like some general savior while knowing the whole time that you're the reason I grew up in hell." "I wanted to tell you. I swear I wanted to, but I didn't know how." "How about the truth?" Samuel's voice is rising now. "How about, hey Samuel, I'm your father, and 23 years ago, I threw you away like garbage because you were inconvenient. That would have been a good start." "You're right," Victor says. He's not defending himself anymore. There's no defense. "You're absolutely right. I was a coward then, and I've been a coward every day since. I built an empire, raised a family, became someone people respect, but I did it all on top of a lie, on top of abandoning you." "Why?" someone asks. It's the question that's been eating him alive since he left his mother's house. Why wasn't I enough? Why was money more important than your own child? Victor doesn't have an answer that will satisfy. He tells the truth anyway. Because I was selfish. Because I was 25 years old and stupid and ambitious, and I thought a baby would ruin my plans. I thought I could make one choice, one terrible choice, and move on with my life. But I was wrong. That choice has haunted me every single day for 23 years. "Good," Samuel says. "I hope it haunts you for 23 more.
I hope every time you look in the mirror, you see what you did to me. I hope you never sleep peacefully again. Victor nods. He deserves that and worse. What can I do? He asks. Tell me what I can do to make this right. Samuel laughs, but there's no humor in it, just pain. You can't make this right. You can't give me back my childhood. You can't erase the years I spent wondering why I wasn't good enough to keep. You can't undo any of it. I know, Victor whispers, but I want to try. I don't care what you want. Samuel's shouting now, and somewhere in the house, Victor's wife and kids are probably awake, listening. You gave up the right to want anything from me when you signed those papers. You gave up the right to be my father. You're right, Victor says again, because Samuel is right about everything. But then Victor says something he's been holding back. But you saved my life anyway. You didn't know who I was, and you saved my life. And that tells me you are a better man than I could ever be. Samuel's anger cracks for just a second. Underneath it, Victor can see the hurt. The little boy who grew up wondering why his father didn't want him. The teenager who aged out of foster care with nobody to call family. The young man who donated blood to a dying stranger because that's who he is. Someone who helps even when he's got nothing to give. I should have let you die, Samuel says, quietly. I should have walked past that hospital and let fate take you. Maybe, Victor agrees, but you didn't. And maybe that's why this happened. Maybe the universe brought us back together because some things are meant to be faced, not buried. Samuel shakes his head. He's exhausted. 23 years of questions just got answered in the worst possible way, and he doesn't know how to process it. I need time, he finally says. I need space. I can't look at you right now. I understand, Victor says. But before you go, I need you to know something. I am proud of you. Proud of who you've become despite everything I put you through. And if you never speak to me again, I'll accept that. But you deserved better. You deserved a father who showed up. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that I wasn't that man. Samuel turns and walks toward the door. But he stops with his hand on the handle. Doesn't turn around. Just says 6 words that hit Victor harder than anything else. You don't get to be sorry. Then he's gone. The door closes. And Victor stands in his mansion surrounded by wealth and success that suddenly means absolutely nothing. His wife comes downstairs. She heard everything. She wraps her arms around him while he breaks down for the first time in decades. The next morning, Samuel quits his job. Sends an email, doesn't come in. Victor doesn't fight it. Over the next few weeks, he tries to give Samuel space while also trying to figure out how to fix something that might be permanently broken. He sets up a college fund anonymously, but Samuel finds out and sends the money back. He tries to send gifts, letters, anything. Samuel returns them all. Chioma sits Victor down one night and tells him something he needs to hear. You can't buy forgiveness. You can't throw money at this and make it better. The only thing you can do is prove you've changed. Not with words, not with checks, but with actions that don't benefit you at all. So, Victor starts small.
He creates a scholarship fund for kids aging out of foster care, names it after Samuel without asking permission. He volunteers at the same shelter where Samuel stayed, working side by side with people he would have ignored 6 months ago. He tracks down other women from his past who he treated badly and apologizes, makes amends where he can. He doesn't do any of it publicly. No press releases, no social media, no credit. He does it because for the first time in his adult life, he's thinking about someone other than himself. And Samuel? Samuel's watching. He hears about the scholarship fund, hears about Victor showing up at the shelter every week, hears about the changes happening at Okonkwo Industries, better wages for low-level workers, better benefits, more opportunities for people without fancy degrees. 3 months pass, then 4, then 6, and slowly, very slowly, Samuel's anger starts making room for something else. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but maybe space to try.
One Sunday evening, Samuel shows up at Victor's house unannounced. Victor opens the door and just stares. Samuel looks better. He's enrolled in community college, working part-time, building a life. "I'm not here to forgive you," Samuel says before Victor can speak. "I don't know if I ever will, but I've been thinking. You made a terrible choice 23 years ago, and maybe you've been a coward since then, but you're trying to be different now. And I guess what I'm saying is I'm willing to see if you can actually be the father you should have been." Victor's crying. Can't help it. "I won't let you down. I swear I won't." "You better not," Samuel says, "because this is your only chance. You mess this up and we're done forever." They don't hug. They're not there yet. But Samuel comes inside, meets his half-siblings properly for the first time, sits at the dinner table with his father's family. It's awkward, painful even, but it's a start. Over the next year, they build something. Not the father-son relationship Samuel dreamed of as a kid. That's gone, lost to time and bad choices. But something new, something honest. Samuel calls Victor by his first name, not Dad. He keeps his distance emotionally, but he shows up. He comes to family dinners. He texts when something good happens at school. He lets Victor help pay for college, not as a payoff, but as what Victor should have been doing all along. And Victor? Victor learns what it means to earn something instead of buying it. Learns that showing up consistently is harder than writing a check. Learns that his son is strong and smart and kind in ways Victor never was. One afternoon, they're sitting on Victor's balcony looking out over Lagos. Samuel asks a question that's been on his mind. "Do you think about what my life would have been like if you'd kept me?" Victor's honest. Every single day. You would have grown up with everything. The best schools, travel, opportunities. But you also would have had me as a father. And back then, I was a terrible person. So maybe it wouldn't have been better, just different. Samuel nods. "I think about it too. And you know what's weird? I don't think I'd change it. All the pain, all the struggle, it made me who I am. And I like who I am. I'm kind because I know what it's like to be invisible. I help people because people helped me. I don't take anything for granted because I've had nothing. So maybe it worked out the way it needed to." "You're a better man than I deserve," Victor says. "Yeah," Samuel agrees. "But you're trying to be better. And maybe that's worth something." They sit in silence for a while. Then Samuel asks another question. "Did you ever try to find me? Before the accident, before all this, did you ever wonder what happened to me?" Victor could lie, could say yes, but they're past that now. "No, I buried you in my mind because it was easier than facing what I'd done. I told myself you were better off without me, that Adanya probably found a good family for you, that everything worked out. I lied to myself for 23 years. And I'm ashamed of that." Samuel appreciates the honesty, even if it hurts. "At least you're telling the truth now. That's more than a lot of people would do."
But here's the thing about this story that nobody saw coming. Remember how Victor nearly died in that car crash? Remember how Samuel's blood saved him? Well, 6 months after they started rebuilding their relationship, Victor goes in for a routine checkup. The doctors find something, a rare blood disorder that was probably always there but got triggered by the trauma from the accident. It's serious, could be fatal if left untreated. The treatment requires regular blood transfusions, and because of how rare his blood type is, finding donors is difficult. The hospital puts out a call. They need all negative donors, specifically people whose blood is compatible with Victor's unique markers. They test his wife, not a match. They test his 3 other children, none of them match. They test extended family, friends, employees, nobody's compatible. Then Samuel walks into that hospital and rolls up his sleeve. "Test me," he says. The doctors run the blood work. And of course, because life has a sense of irony that borders on cruel, Samuel's not just a match, he's a perfect match. The only person in their entire network
whose blood is compatible enough for long-term transfusion. So now Samuel's back in that donation room, sitting in the same chair where this whole story started, giving blood to save his father's life a second time. But this time, they both know. This time, it means something different. "You don't have to do this," Victor says when he finds out. "I can find other options, other treatments. You don't owe me anything." But Samuel keeps showing up. Every 2 weeks, regular as clockwork, he donates blood. Sometimes they talk during the process. Sometimes they sit in silence. But Samuel keeps coming back, keeps saving the father who once threw him away. One day, Victor asks him why. "Why do you keep doing this? After everything I did, why do you keep saving my life?" Samuel thinks about it for a long time before answering. "Because you're trying. Because you're not the same man you were 23 years ago. Because forgiveness isn't something you reach, it's something you practice. And because somewhere along the way, I realized that hating you was hurting me more than it was hurting you. So I'm choosing something different. I'm choosing to let you try to be my father, even if it's 23 years too late." Victor's crying again. He does that a lot now. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," Samuel agrees. "But we don't always get what we deserve. Sometimes we get chances we don't deserve. And what we do with those chances, that's what matters." 2 years pass. Samuel graduates college. Victor is there in the audience cheering louder than anyone. Samuel gets accepted into graduate school. Victor helps with applications but doesn't try to buy his way in. Samuel starts dating someone. Victor meets her. Awkward as hell, but he tries. They're building something. It's not perfect. Samuel still has days where the anger comes back, where he remembers sleeping in shelters while his father slept in mansions. Victor still carries guilt that no amount of good deeds will ever erase, but they're trying. And in the end, maybe that's all any of us can do. Try to be better than we were yesterday. Try to face our mistakes instead of burying them. Try to show up even when it's uncomfortable. Try to love even when we don't think we deserve to be loved back. The story could end there, wrap everything up nice and neat, but life doesn't work that way. Because here's the final twist that nobody saw coming, except maybe fate itself. 3 years after that first blood donation, Samuel's at the hospital for his regular donation appointment. He's in the waiting room, scrolling through his phone, when he notices a young woman in the corner. She's crying, trying to be quiet about it, but Samuel spent enough time in pain to recognize it in others. He walks over, asks if she's okay. She looks up, and there's something familiar about her face, though Samuel can't place it. "My brother needs a kidney transplant. He's 14, and I'm not a match. None of my family is. They're saying he's got maybe 6 months without it, and the donor list is years long." Samuel sits down next to her. "What's his blood type?" "O negative. The doctor said it makes finding a donor even harder."
Samuel knows that blood type intimately. It's his blood type, the rare one that saved his father twice. "I'll get tested," he hears himself saying. "I'll see if I'm a match." The woman looks at him like he's crazy. "You don't even know us. Why would you do that?" And Samuel thinks about a homeless kid walking into a hospital 2 years ago to donate blood for a stranger. Thinks about how that one decision changed everything. Thinks about second chances and paying forward grace you didn't earn. "Because someone gave me a chance once," he says, "and it saved my life in ways I never expected." He gets tested, and because the universe apparently has a sense of humor, he's a match, a perfect match. The surgery's scheduled for 2 months out. Samuel tells Victor, expecting him to freak out, to try to talk him out of it, but Victor surprises him. "You're a better man than I'll ever be," he says. "But please be careful. Make sure you understand the risks."
Samuel understands. He's donating a kidney to a kid he doesn't know because that's who he is. That's who he's always been, even when life tried to break him. The surgery goes well. The kid survives. Thrives, actually. And 6 months later, Samuel gets a letter from the boy's family. It's an invitation to dinner. He almost doesn't go, but something pulls him there. When he arrives at the address, he recognizes the neighborhood. It's middle-class Lagos. Not rich, but comfortable. The family opens the door, the sister he met at the hospital, her parents, and the 14-year-old boy who's alive because Samuel gave him part of himself. They sit down to eat, and the conversation flows easily. Then the father says something that makes Samuel's blood run cold. "We can never repay you for what you've done. You saved our son's life. You're a hero, just like your father." Samuel's confused. "You know my father?" The man nods. "Victor Okonkwo. We went to university together back in the day. Lost touch over the years, but I heard he nearly died in a car crash a few years back. Heard some stranger saved his life with a blood donation. And now here you are saving my son's life. Must run in the family." Samuel's mind is racing. This man knows Victor, knew him before all the success, before all the money. What was he like back then in university? The man thinks about it. Ambitious, driven, a bit ruthless, honestly. But that's what it took to succeed coming from where we came from. Why do you ask? Samuel could tell the truth, could explain that Victor is his father, that the story's more complicated than anyone knows. But instead, he says something else. "Just curious. He's been a mentor to me, helped me get my life together." After dinner, Samuel goes back to Victor's house. His father's on the balcony, reading reports even though it's late. Samuel joins him. "I had dinner with an old friend of yours tonight, from university." Victor looks up. "Oh, yeah? Who?" Samuel tells him. Victor's face lights up with recognition. "I haven't thought about him in years. Good man. We lost touch after graduation." "How do you know him?" "His son needed a kidney. I donated mine." Victor sets down his papers. "You what?" "The kid was dying. I was a match, so I did what anyone should do. I helped." Victor's staring at his son like he's seeing him for the first time all over again. "Do you have any idea how rare you are? How few people would do what you've done?" Samuel shrugs. "I learned from experience that sometimes the people who save your life are the ones you least expect. Sometimes fate puts you in the right place at the right time, and you have a choice. You can walk away, or you can be someone's miracle." They sit in silence for a while. Then Victor asks the question that's been on his mind since they reconnected. "Do you think you'll ever fully forgive me?" Samuel considers it honestly. "I don't know. Some days yes, some days no. But I'm learning that forgiveness isn't a destination. It's a practice. It's choosing every day to move forward instead of staying stuck. And I'm choosing to move forward with you in my life, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace."
"That's more than I could ever ask for," Victor says quietly. "I know," Samuel replies. "But here's the thing. You didn't ask. You just showed up. You kept showing up even when I pushed you away. And that matters. Actions matter more than words." 3 months later, Samuel meets someone at a coffee shop. Her name is Joy, and she's a social worker who specializes in foster care. They start talking, and Samuel mentions his background, tells her about growing up in the system, about the struggles, about how he's trying to use his experience to help others. "There's a kid at the agency," Joy says, 17 years old, about to age out, smart, good heart, but the system's been rough on him. He reminds me of how you described yourself back then. Would you be willing to talk to him? Maybe mentor him?" Samuel says yes, because of course he does. That's who he is. The kid's name is David. When they meet, Samuel sees himself at 17. Angry, scared,
trying to act tough while feeling completely lost. They start meeting once a week. Samuel doesn't try to be his savior, doesn't try to fix everything, just shows up, listens, shares his story, helps with job applications, teaches him how to navigate the world that's about to kick him out of the system. One day, David asks Samuel the same question Samuel asked Victor. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. And Samuel gives him the same answer he's learned over the past few years. Because someone showed up for me when I needed it. And now, it's my turn to show up for you. 6 months later, when David ages out of foster care, he doesn't end up on the streets. He's got a job, a room in a shared apartment, and a plan. He's got Samuel's phone number programmed in his phone with instructions to call anytime, day or night. He's got a fighting chance. And isn't that all any of us really need? A fighting chance and someone who believes in us. The story spirals out from there. David meets other kids in the system, shares what Samuel taught him. They create an informal network, helping each other survive. Samuel gets more involved, works with Joy's agency, starts a nonprofit focused on helping kids transition out of foster care. Victor funds it, but Samuel runs it. They call it second chances, because everyone deserves one. 5 years after that first blood donation, Samuel's sitting in a conference room full of people whose lives he's touched. Some he helped directly, others were helped by people he helped. It's a ripple effect he never planned, never expected. Victor's there too, sitting in the back, watching his son lead a meeting about expanding their programs. After everyone leaves, Victor approaches Samuel. Can I tell you something? Sure. That car crash, the one that almost killed me. Sometimes I think it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Samuel raises an eyebrow. You almost died. How is that the best thing? Because it brought you, Victor says simply. It forced me to face what I'd done. It gave me a chance to know my son. And yeah, I lost 23 years. Yeah, I can never get those back. But I got you now. And watching you change lives, watching you be the man I should have been, that's worth more than all the money I've ever made. Samuel doesn't cry easily. But right now, in this empty conference room with his father, he feels his eyes getting wet. You know what's crazy? If you hadn't abandoned me, I wouldn't be who I am. All that pain, all that struggle, it made me someone who helps people because I know what it's like to need help. So in some twisted way, your worst decision led to something good. That doesn't make what I did okay, Victor says firmly. Don't let me off the hook. I'm not, Samuel assures him, but I'm also not going to let your mistake define my entire life. You made a choice, I made different ones, and somehow we ended up here.
They walk out of that building together, father and son. Not the relationship either of them expected, but maybe the one they both needed. Because this story isn't really about abandonment or reunion. It's about choice. About the fact that we're all one decision away from changing someone's life, including our own. Samuel chose to donate blood to a stranger. Victor chose to face his past instead of running from it. Both of them chose, every day, to try to be better. And that's what makes the story remarkable. Not the coincidence of the blood donation, not the dramatic revelation, but the quiet, daily choice to show up, to try, to believe that people can change, and that second chances, while rare, are worth fighting for. 10 years after the accident, Samuel and Victor are having breakfast at that same cafe where they first met. Samuel's got a PhD now, runs a successful non-profit, has a family of his own, a wife and a daughter named Adana, after the grandmother she'll never meet. Victor's older, grayer, slower. The blood disorder is under control thanks to Samuel's regular donations, but age is catching up. They're talking about Samuel's daughter's upcoming birthday party when Victor says something unexpected. I've been thinking about writing a book, about everything that happened, about my mistakes and what I've learned. Samuel's surprised. That's brave. Most people want to hide their failures. I spent 23 years hiding, Victor says. I'm done with that. I want people to know that you can make terrible choices and still try to be better. That redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about facing it. What would you call it? Samuel asks. Victor smiles. I was thinking the blood donation, because that's where everything changed. 1 pint of blood from a homeless kid who had every reason to walk away. 1 choice that saved my life twice. Once from dying, once from staying the man I was. Samuel nods. I like it. But you should add something. What? That forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to move forward. It's about recognizing that people are more than their worst moments. Victor pulls out a pen and writes that down. Then he looks at his son who he's finally earned the right to call that, and asks one more question. Do you think she'd be proud? Your mother? Do you think Adana would forgive me? Samuel thinks about the woman he met once, the woman who gave him life and then gave him up because she thought it was best. I don't know, but I think she'd be glad we found each other. I think she'd be happy that her son has a father now, even if it's 23 years late. They finish breakfast, pay the bill, walk outside into Lagos traffic and heat and noise. And before they part ways, Victor does something he's been afraid to do for 10 years. He hugs his son, really hugs him. And Samuel, who once swore he'd never forgive this man, hugs him back. Because this is what redemption looks like. Not perfect, not without scars, but real. If this story moved you, if you believe in second chances and the power of showing up even when it's hard, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories. Drop a comment below. Do you think some mistakes can be forgiven? Can people really change? And what would you have done in Samuel's position? Let's talk about it. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to try to make things right. Until next time, remember your story isn't over and neither is anyone else's.